There's something strange about highways at night. They're supposed to be places of motion, lines of light stretching endlessly through the dark, carrying us from one place to another. But when the sun sinks and the road empties, they become something else entirely. They become liminal spaces. Vast, lonely corridors that feel separate from the rest of the world, and in those forgotten miles, things can happen that defy explanation. Tonight, we're diving into highway horror stories, true, told in quiet voices meant to unsettle as you drift toward sleep. Stories of travelers who took a wrong turn into the unknown, of roads that remember what we wish they would forget, and of places where the past lingers, waiting by the roadside. So settle in. Dim the lights. And let the hum of the road carry you into the darkness. Our first story begins with what should have been an ordinary night drive, a late return from a friend's house on a quiet stretch of highway. But for one traveler, the road had other plans, and what started as a peaceful journey became a brush with something they still can't explain. Story 1: The Man by Mile Marker 232. I've spent most of my adult life behind the wheel. I'm a long-haul truck driver, the kind who knows the shape of every interstate in the western half of the country by the way the wind shifts through the open window. Out here, nights on the highway can feel like another world, entirely silent, endless, and strangely alive. If you drive long enough, you'll learn what every trucker knows but rarely says aloud: some stretches of road are different. Some places, remember. And there's one highway in particular that still makes my skin crawl, no matter how many times I've taken it, Route 50, cutting across the empty heart of Nevada. They call it the loneliest road in America, and they're not wrong. For hundreds of miles, there's nothing but scrubland, mountains that never seem to get closer, and a road so straight it feels like it's been drawn with a ruler. This is a story about something that happened to me on that road, something I've never been able to explain. It's the kind of story truckers swap in whispers at diners around midnight. Some say it's just a legend, but I know better. I was there. This is my account of what happened by mile marker 232, one of those highway horror stories, true, that stay with you long after the engine's gone cold. A routine haul on a dead quiet night. It was late autumn, a few years back. I was hauling refrigerated produce from Sacramento to Denver, a run I'd done so many times I could almost do it blindfolded. I'd left Reno after sunset, and by midnight, I was deep into Nevada's vast nowhere. The night was as clear as glass. The moon hung low over the mountains, pale and watchful. My rig hummed steadily beneath me, the white noise of the tires the only company for miles. Every so often, I'd pass a faded green sign or a lonely reflector post, but otherwise it was just darkness and the unblinking white line stretching endlessly ahead. I wasn't tired, not yet. I'd had a strong coffee back at the truck stop and a few hours of rest earlier. Nights like that are my favorite, actually. There's something meditative about an empty road. It feels like the world has forgotten you exist. But as I passed the sign for mile marker 200, something shifted. I can't explain it, but the air inside the cab suddenly felt heavier, as if the night itself had leaned closer. The desert outside looked the same, endless, barren, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. I turned the radio down, thinking maybe I was just getting jumpy from the isolation. But the unease didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger with every mile. A shadow by the roadside. It was just past 1:17 a.m. when I saw him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Up ahead, maybe 200 yards down the road, there was a figure standing on the shoulder, tall, motionless, almost blending into the dark. My high beams caught him in fleeting glimpses, just enough to make out a long coat or jacket that fluttered slightly in the breeze. I remember my first thought was, what the hell is someone doing out here? There were no towns within 50 miles in either direction, no houses, no gas stations. Just dirt and silence. As I closed the distance, a cold ripple worked its way down my spine. The figure wasn't walking, or hitchhiking, or even turning toward me. He was just standing, perfectly still, like a statue planted in the sand. I eased off the accelerator as I passed him, craning my neck for a better look. He was tall, maybe 6'4", and wore what looked like a long, dark duster coat, the kind you'd see in old westerns. But the strangest part? I couldn't see his face. The moonlight hit him full on, but from the neck up, it was as if the night swallowed him whole. And then he was gone. I blinked, and the rear-view mirrors showed nothing but empty road stretching behind me. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. Great, I muttered to myself. Now I'm seeing ghosts. But deep down, I knew I hadn't imagined it. He was there. I felt him there, a cold, oppressive weight that lingered even after he vanished from sight. The man appears again. I told myself to forget about it. People wander out here sometimes, drifters, desert hermits, who knows? Maybe he was just heading somewhere on foot. But that explanation unraveled 20 minutes later. I'd been driving steady, eyes fixed on the hypnotic double yellow line, when the CB crackled unexpectedly. It was just static, faint but deliberate, like someone trying to tune in. Then silence. I frowned and adjusted the dial, but the channel was empty. A few miles later, the road curved slightly around a low ridge and my stomach dropped. There he was again. Same long coat. Same stiff, unnatural posture. Same patch of shoulder, now by mile marker 232. This time, he was facing the road. And this time, he was close enough that I could make out the pale outline of hands dangling at his sides. I still couldn't see a face. It was as though someone had blurred that part of reality entirely. I gripped the wheel tighter. There was no way. He couldn't have gotten there on foot, not that fast. I'd been doing 65 non-stop. That was more than 30 miles between sightings, 30 miles of nothing but asphalt and dust. Unless it wasn't the same man. But I knew it was. An unnerving ride. By now, the easy calm I'd felt earlier was gone. My rig felt too small, the cab too quiet. Every creak and rattle seemed amplified. I glanced in my mirrors constantly, half expecting to see someone clinging to the trailer or running along the shoulder behind me. The CB hissed again, another burst of static and then a whisper. Not words exactly, more like the shape of words, soft and distorted. It sounded almost like someone trying to speak from a long distance, just out of range. I killed the volume and drove in silence. I just wanted to get past this stretch of road and into the next town. But then something happened that turned unease into outright dread. About 5 miles past mile marker 232, I saw headlights approaching from behind. That in itself was rare out here. I hadn't seen another vehicle for hours, but I felt oddly relieved. Maybe I'd been spooking myself for no reason. The lights grew closer, brighter. A small sedan, maybe silver or white, coming up fast. I shifted lanes slightly to let it pass. But it didn't. It hung back just out of view, pacing me. I tapped the brakes lightly. The headlights slowed too. I sped up, so did they. After about 3 minutes of this, my nerves were shot. I was about to grab the CB and call out when the headlights vanished. No turn off. No slowdown. No fading into the distance. 1 second they were there, glowing in my mirrors, and the next, gone, as if they'd never existed. I checked the road behind me, nothing but darkness. I checked the shoulder, empty. My pulse hammered in my throat. Something was very, very wrong. The crash site. It was around 2:05 a.m. when I saw the wreck. The beam of my headlights swept across twisted metal by the roadside. A car, mangled and half buried in the sand about 20 feet off the shoulder. I slowed to a crawl, heart racing. It looked old, maybe from the 80s, the paint sun-bleached and flaking. It had clearly been there a long time. The strange thing was, I'd never seen it before, despite taking this route dozens of times. And judging by how deeply it was buried in dust, it hadn't moved in years. I pulled over, engine idling, and climbed down from the cab. The desert air was cold and dry. The wreck was silent, no lights, no smell of gas, no sign of recent damage. Just the skeletal remains of a car that had once met a violent end. I approached slowly, flashlight in hand. The windshield was shattered inward. The driver's door hung open at an odd angle. Inside, the upholstery was rotted and torn, the steering wheel wrapped in brittle, sun-cracked leather. And then I saw it. There, wedged between the driver's seat and the floorboard, was a pair of old boots, scuffed, sun-bleached, and unmistakably large. Beside them, a long black coat, draped over the seat like someone had left in a hurry. My breath caught in my chest. It was his coat. It had to be. The same one I'd seen twice that night. Suddenly the night felt alive again, the silence too silent, pressing in on me from all sides. I turned back toward my truck and froze. He was standing on the road, just beyond my headlights. Face to face. He was closer now, maybe 30 yards away. The coat fluttered gently in the desert wind, the same way it had before. Only now, he was facing me directly. I don't know how long we stood like that, me rooted in place by a fear so primal it felt ancient, and him unmoving, featureless, like a void shaped roughly into a man. And then, he moved. Not toward me. Not away. He simply turned, slowly, deliberately, until he was facing down the highway. He took one step forward. Then another. And then, in 3 long strides, he vanished, not into the desert, not behind anything, just gone, as if he had melted back into the darkness itself. I scrambled back into my cab, slammed the door, and tore out of there as fast as my rig would go. I didn't stop until I reached Ely, nearly 2 hours later. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold a cup of coffee at the all-night diner. The old record. I didn't tell anyone about what I'd seen that night, not at first. Most folks don't believe that kind of story, and even fewer want to. But a few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. On my next run, I stopped at a small roadside cafe near Route 50 and struck up a conversation with an older man at the counter, another trucker, by the look of him. When I mentioned the stretch near mile marker 232, his eyes narrowed. "You saw him, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Most do, sooner or later. That stretch, it's cursed ground." He went on to tell me a story. Decades ago, sometime in the late 1970s, a man driving cross-country with his wife and child lost control of his car near mile marker 232. They'd been on the road too long, driving through the night. He'd nodded off for just a moment, but that's all it took. The sedan flipped twice and landed off the road. His wife and son died on impact. He crawled out alive barely and staggered into the desert to find help. But when rescuers arrived hours later, they found only the bodies. The man had vanished. Some said he died out there, lost and broken. Others claimed he walked the highway for days before taking his own life. No one ever found him. But folks still see him, the old trucker said, staring into his coffee. Tall fella. Long coat. No face you can see. Always near 232. The return trip. I told myself I wouldn't drive that route again. There are other ways to Denver, longer but safer for the mind, anyway. But trucking doesn't always leave you with choices, and 2 months later, I found myself on Route 50 again. It was winter by then. A thin layer of snow covered the desert floor, glowing pale beneath the moonlight. I told myself I wasn't scared. That maybe it had all been a trick of the eyes, a mix of exhaustion and imagination. But when I passed mile marker 232, the CB crackled again. Static. Then a whisper. Then silence. And for just a second a heartbeat, no more. I caught sight of him in my mirror. Standing exactly where he'd been before. Watching. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. But I knew, and I still know, that some part of that road belongs to him. Epilogue: the road remembers. I've heard dozens of stories since then from other drivers, each one eerily similar. A tall man by the roadside. A faceless figure who appears in more than one place at once. Headlights that follow you and then vanish. A wreck that sometimes isn't there when you go back to look. Not everyone believes them. Some say it's just tricks of the night, or exhaustion playing with your mind. But the details are too precise, the patterns too consistent. And the strangest part? The accident the old trucker told me about. I looked it up. It happened in 1978, right there at mile marker 232. The wife and child were buried in Ely. The man was never found. Maybe he's still searching for them. Maybe he's trying to warn others. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me awake on empty highways, he doesn't even know he's dead. What I do know is this: if you ever find yourself driving Route 50 late at night, and you see a man standing alone by the shoulder, don't stop. Don't look too long. Just keep driving, and don't glance in the mirror. Because once you see him, he might not let you go. This is one of those highway horror stories true that no amount of time seems to erase. Roads remember. Asphalt holds echoes. And out there, on the loneliest stretch of pavement in America, one man still walks the line between life and death, waiting for someone else to notice. Some stories cling to places long after the people are gone. Our next account takes us to a highway rest stop, one that, on the surface, seemed perfectly ordinary. But as night fell, its empty parking spaces and humming lights revealed a darker truth. This is the second of our highway horror stories, true, and it reminds us that not all roads lead where we expect. Story 2, The Woman on Route 41. I've always believed the highway changes at night. It's not just the absence of daylight, it's something deeper, stranger. The road you drive in the afternoon is not the same road you travel after midnight. It's quieter, yes. But also, older, somehow. As if every mile of asphalt remembers the stories written on it, the crashes, the goodbyes, the final breaths. And if you're alone long enough, sometimes those stories remember you back. I learned that truth one winter night nearly 15 years ago, on a lonely stretch of Route 41 in northern Wisconsin. What happened that night still visits my dreams, still crawls into my thoughts when I'm alone on a dark road. And I swear to you, every word of it is true. A long drive through nowhere. It was late December, just a few days before Christmas. I was driving home to Milwaukee from a delivery job in Duluth, hauling a half-empty trailer and making good time. A snowstorm had rolled through earlier that afternoon, leaving a thin white layer across the landscape. By nightfall, the clouds had cleared, and the moon cast a ghostly glow over everything, cold and beautiful and eerily silent. It was just after 1 a.m. when I merged onto Route 41, a two-lane highway that cuts through miles of pine forest and farmland. That stretch between Green Bay and Oshkosh is desolate at night. No gas stations, no diners, no towns, just trees and snow and the rhythmic hum of your tires. Normally, I love that kind of drive. It's peaceful, meditative. But that night, I felt an undercurrent of unease I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe the way the snow muted every sound, swallowing even the roar of my diesel engine into something soft and distant. Or maybe, deep down, I knew the night was about to change. The figure by the road. I'd been driving for about an hour when I saw her. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the snow, a shape my headlights carved out of the drifting white. But as I drew closer, the shape sharpened into something unmistakable, a woman, standing on the shoulder of the road. She was maybe 40 yards ahead, standing very still, facing the forest. No flashlight. No car. Just her, a solitary figure in a long coat that reached her knees. Her hair was dark and loose, stirred gently by the wind. I slowed instinctively, squinting through the glass. What was she doing out here? There was nothing around for miles, no driveways, no houses, nothing but woods and snow. As I passed, I glanced at her from the cab. She didn't turn. Didn't wave. Didn't even flinch as the roar of my truck rolled past. She just kept staring into the dark line of trees. For a long moment, I debated pulling over. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe her car had broken down and she was stranded. But something in my gut told me to keep going. The whole scene felt wrong. Too still. Too deliberate. I checked my mirrors. She was gone. Not walking, not fading into the distance, gone. Vanished into thin air. The second sighting. I drove another 15 miles, trying to shake the unease. I told myself I'd imagined it, that maybe I'd just misread a tree stump or a snowdrift. But I knew better. The image of her, that stillness, that unnatural calm, clung to me like frost on glass. And then, just past the sign for County Road BB, I saw her again. Same woman. Same long coat. Same dark hair moving slightly in the wind. Only now, she was standing on the opposite side of the highway, closer to the treeline, her back still turned toward the road. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. This was impossible. She couldn't have gotten here on foot, not in this cold, not that quickly. Even if she'd been running flat out, she wouldn't have beaten me to this stretch. But there she was. As real as the steering wheel beneath my hands. I didn't slow down this time. I pressed harder on the pedal, eyes fixed on the white line ahead, heart thudding like a drum. I didn't want to see her face. I didn't want her to look at me. I kept telling myself, just keep driving. Just keep driving. The woman in the road. The highway curved gently a few miles later, winding through a dense patch of forest. My headlights cut long shadows through the snow-laden trees, painting the world in black and white. My nerves had just begun to settle when my blood ran cold. She was standing in the middle of the road. Not on the shoulder. Not by the trees. Directly ahead of me. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming against the icy pavement. The trailer fishtailed slightly, the rig shuddering as it slowed. My heart hammered against my ribs as the distance between us closed fast. 70 yards, 50, 30. And then she was gone. No scream. No impact. Nothing. 1 second she was there, pale and motionless in the center of the lane, and the next, the road was empty. I sat frozen behind the wheel, breath shallow, hands trembling on the steering wheel. My rig rolled to a stop in the middle of Route 41, engine idling, exhaust puffing into the cold night air. The forest around me was silent. The road was empty. But the fear in my chest told me I wasn't alone. The voice on the CB. I didn't want to linger. I eased back onto the accelerator, heart still pounding, and tried to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever I'd just seen. The snow began to fall again, light flakes swirling through my headlights, and soon the world outside felt like a swirling, endless void. That's when the CB radio crackled to life. It started as static, faint and distant. Then a voice, soft and distorted, like it was coming from miles away. Help, please, help me. I froze. The voice was a woman's. Weak. Pleading. I need help, please stop. My mouth went dry. I hadn't touched the radio. The mic was clipped where it always was, and the channel I used was mostly silent at this hour. And yet the voice kept coming, fading in and out of the static like someone struggling to speak through a blizzard. Please, stop. I turned the volume down, heart racing. The voice faded to nothing. The static died. And once again, I was alone with the hum of the engine and the whisper of the snow. A house in the trees. Another 20 miles passed. The storm grew heavier, and visibility dropped to a few car lengths. I slowed my pace and leaned forward, squinting into the swirling dark. My eyes were aching from the strain when I saw a faint yellow light through the trees. A house. Or maybe a cabin. Small, old, set back about 50 yards from the road. I hadn't noticed it before, but with the snow and darkness, I might have missed it earlier. There was a shape near the edge of the property. A woman, maybe. Standing motionless in the falling snow, facing the road. My stomach turned to ice. It was her. Same coat. Same hair. Same eerie stillness. Only now, she was closer. Just a few yards from the highway. And though the snow veiled her face, I swear I could feel her eyes on me. I drove faster. I didn't look back. The police report. I made it to Oshkosh just before 4 a.m., pale and shaking. I parked my rig at a truck stop and stumbled inside, desperate for coffee and human company. The night clerk must have seen something in my face because he asked if I was all right. I told him what I'd seen: the woman by the road, the sudden appearances, the voice on the CB. I expected him to laugh, or at least look skeptical. Instead, he just stared at me quietly for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You're not the first," he said. He told me that stretch of Route 41 had a reputation, one that went back decades. There had been an accident there in the winter of 1983. A young woman driving home for the holidays lost control on the icy road and crashed into the trees. Her car flipped and burst into flames. They found her in the wreckage, badly burned but still alive. Witnesses said she crawled out and staggered toward the road, trying to wave down help. But by the time another driver came along, she was gone. They found her body in the woods the next morning, less than 30 feet from the highway. Some say she still tries to flag down help. Others believe she's searching for someone, maybe the driver who didn't stop that night. Either way, travelers report seeing her every winter, always around the same time, always near the same mile markers. The final encounter. I didn't plan on ever taking Route 41 again. But life has a way of leading you back to the places you fear most. 3 years later, I was hauling freight on a route that left me with no other option. December again. Snow again. And sure enough, I found myself merging onto that familiar stretch of highway just after midnight. I was nervous, but I told myself I'd imagined it all before. Maybe it had been exhaustion. Maybe I'd been half asleep, my mind conjuring ghosts out of snow and shadow. But as I passed County Road BB, the radio crackled. "Help, please, help me." The same voice. The same words. And there, just ahead by the shoulder this time, stood a woman in a long coat, her back turned toward the forest. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't slow down. I didn't speak. And as my rig rolled past her, she turned her head. Just slightly. Just enough. And I saw her face. It was pale. Hollow. Burned on one side, as if frozen in the moment the flames touched her. And her eyes were not angry or vengeful. They were pleading. Sad. Desperate. Then she was gone. The road's memory. I've driven thousands of miles since that night. I've crossed deserts and mountains, highways and back roads, in every kind of weather. But no matter where I go, I can't shake the memory of that woman on Route 41. Some nights, when I'm driving through snow and silence, I swear I still hear her voice faint, distant, carried on the static of the radio. Please, stop. And I wonder if I ever do stop, if I ever pull over and walk into that snow, would I find anything there? Would I see her, waiting at the edge of the woods? Or would I find nothing but silence and frost, as if she'd never been? I don't have the answer. All I know is that highways remember. They hold the stories we leave behind, every crash, every tragedy, every final breath. And sometimes, when the night is cold and the snow is falling just right, those stories step out of the shadows and ask to be remembered too. So if you ever find yourself driving alone on Route 41 in the dead of winter, and you see a woman standing by the trees, don't stop. Don't look back. Just keep driving. Because not every figure on the roadside is living. This is one of those highway horror stories, true, that never leave you. A tragedy frozen in time, replaying itself on the same stretch of road again and again. And out there, under the cold Wisconsin moon, a woman still waits for help that will never come. The final story tonight is perhaps the most unsettling of them all, a story whispered among truckers and long-haul drivers, passed down like a warning. It's about a stretch of Interstate 84, a vanished exit, and a barefoot girl who's been waiting by the roadside for over 30 years. This is the story of Exit 119, and the haunting that refuses to fade. Story 3, Exit 119. Highways are strange places when you think about it. They're meant to connect us, towns, lives, destinies, yet they exist mostly apart from the world. A ribbon of asphalt cutting through emptiness, passed by thousands, truly seen by almost no one. And in that emptiness, sometimes, things linger. If you ask old truckers or seasoned travelers about haunted highways, most will have a story. A stretch of road they won't drive at night. A mile marker they pass a little faster. A shape they saw once and never spoke of again. This is one of those stories. And I swear to you, every word is true. It happened in the summer of 2009, on a deserted section of Interstate 84 in Idaho, near a place locals call Exit 119. I was younger then, still new to long-haul driving, eager to make a name for myself. I didn't believe in ghosts, or curses, or haunted roads. But one night on that lonely stretch of highway changed my mind forever. A midnight delivery. It was a simple run, a load of electronics from Portland to Salt Lake City. I'd left late to avoid traffic, planning to drive through the night and reach the depot by morning. The weather was clear and the road dry, the kind of night truckers dream about. By 12:40 a.m., I was deep into Idaho, endless fields on either side, occasional clusters of trees breaking the horizon. The highway was empty. Not a single set of headlights ahead or behind. The only sound was the hum of my engine and the rhythmic hiss of tires against pavement. I remember feeling a sense of peace, that meditative state that comes after hours on the road. Everything felt predictable, safe, ordinary. Then I saw the sign. Exit 119, 1 mile. I didn't think much of it. Just another anonymous off-ramp into another anonymous patch of farmland. I had no reason to take it. But the night had other plans. The girl by the guardrail. I saw her just before the exit. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer, maybe moving by the roadside. But as I drew closer, the shape sharpened into something unmistakably human, a girl, no older than 16, standing barefoot on the shoulder. She wore a pale dress, the kind that looked decades out of fashion. Her hair was long and tangled, her arms hanging limp at her sides. She wasn't waving. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there, staring down at the gravel beneath her feet. I slowed instinctively, craning my neck for a better look as I passed. That's when she looked up. Her eyes caught the glare of my headlights, two wide, hollow pools of fear, and for a heartbeat, I felt something cold grip my chest. There was something deeply wrong about her expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something older. Something empty. And then, as the rig rolled past and I checked my mirror, she was gone. Not walking away. Not shrinking into the distance. Just gone. The empty exit. I didn't stop. I kept going. But my heart was pounding in a way it hadn't in years. Maybe she was a runaway. Maybe someone in trouble. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. 5 minutes later, I saw headlights in the distance behind me. They grew brighter, closer, then slowed and stayed far back. It was another vehicle, but something about it felt off. The lights were too dim, too uneven, as if they flickered with each turn of the wheels. They stayed behind me for nearly 10 minutes, not passing, not falling back before vanishing entirely. No exit nearby. No sign of a turn. Just gone, like they'd never been there. By now my nerves were stretched thin. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed rest. And when I saw a rest stop sign 2 miles ahead, I decided to pull in. Only, there was no rest stop. I slowed as the distance counter dropped 1 mile. 1/2 mile. 1/4 mile, but the sign had lied. The exit ramp was there, sure enough, marked 119, but it led only into darkness. No lights. No rest area. No gas station. Just a narrow, cracked road vanishing into the trees. And standing at the edge of it, illuminated briefly by my passing headlights, was the girl in the white dress. The dead road. I drove past without stopping. My heart was pounding now, breath shallow and quick. There was no way she could have gotten there on foot. None. I was doing 65 the whole time, and she hadn't been anywhere near a vehicle. And yet, there she was. Again. I told myself I wouldn't look back. But I did. And for the briefest moment, I saw headlights turning down that dark exit road, a set of old, dim lights that shouldn't have been there. And then they vanished into the trees. The local story. I didn't sleep well that night. Even when I finally parked at a rest area 50 miles down the interstate, I couldn't shake the image of that girl from my mind. The hollow eyes. The flickering lights. The road that led nowhere. The next afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I stopped at a small diner just outside Twin Falls and struck up a conversation with the waitress, a woman in her 60s with the kind of face that's seen everything twice. When I mentioned exit 119, she went quiet. "Most folks don't talk about that place," she said after a pause. "But you're not the first to see her." Then she told me a story. In the summer of 1986, a family of 4 was driving home from a weekend trip. Somewhere near exit 119, their car blew a tire. It skidded off the highway and rolled twice down the embankment, coming to rest at the edge of the trees. The parents died on impact. The younger daughter, Emily, 16, crawled free and staggered toward the road, barefoot and bleeding. Witnesses say she tried to wave down passing cars for help. But no one stopped. When police arrived hours later, they found the wreckage and the bodies of the parents, but Emily was gone. They searched the woods for 3 days before finding her body less than 30 yards from the highway. She'd died of internal injuries during the night. Since then, drivers have reported seeing a girl by the guardrail near exit 119. Always barefoot. Always in a pale dress. Sometimes she appears miles ahead of the exit, sometimes near the ramp itself. And sometimes, they say, a pair of flickering headlights follows close behind the ghost of the family's old station wagon, still searching for the road home. A return trip. I told myself I'd never drive that stretch again. But fate, or maybe something else, had other ideas. 3 years later, I found myself hauling freight through Idaho again. Same route. Same highway. And just after midnight, as the odometer rolled over a familiar number, I saw it. Exit 119, 1 mile. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself not to look. Not to think. Just drive. But then I saw her. Standing barefoot on the shoulder. Staring at the ground. Waiting. I felt that same cold pressure in my chest, like the air had thickened around me. I told myself to keep going. Don't slow. Don't stop. But something strange happened as I drew closer. Her head lifted. Slowly. And this time, instead of hollow emptiness, there was recognition in her eyes. Like she knew me. Like she'd been waiting. My headlights washed over her, and for a moment, I saw something I can't explain. Behind her, just beyond the guardrail, were flickering points of light, faint and distant, but unmistakable. 4 of them. Too high, too low. Headlights. Tail lights. Moving through the darkness where there was no road. And then she vanished. The vanishing exit. I slowed down as I approached exit 119, torn between dread and curiosity. The ramp was ahead, same as before, narrow and cracked, disappearing into the trees. Only, the sign was gone. There was no green marker. No number. No words. Just an unmarked strip of pavement leading into blackness. I passed it without stopping. But the moment I did, a strange chill swept through the cab, as if I'd driven through an invisible wall of cold air. My breath misted in front of me, even though the night outside was warm. And then for just a heartbeat my headlights caught movement in the mirror. A girl. Standing barefoot by the side of the road. Watching me leave. The patrol officer. I had to know. I needed to know. The next day, I stopped at the state police station in Jerome and asked about exit 119. The officer behind the desk, a man in his 50s with weathered eyes, listened quietly as I described what I'd seen. When I finished, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. "You're not the first," he said. He told me something that chilled me to the bone. That exit 119 had been closed since 1991. The road beyond it was condemned after the crash. It no longer led anywhere. The trees had reclaimed most of it. Even the signage had been removed years ago. Yet dozens of drivers still reported seeing a ramp there. Still reported seeing a barefoot girl. Still reported headlights trailing them for miles before vanishing. The officer's words have stayed with me ever since. "Some places remember," he said quietly. "And some people never make it home. The road that shouldn't be." I've driven thousands of miles since then, across deserts and mountains and endless plains. I've seen things I still can't explain, but nothing unsettles me like exit 119. I passed through Idaho again last year, and though I promised myself I wouldn't, I looked for it. Just once. Just to see. There was no sign. No marker. Nothing but a faint break in the guardrail where a ramp used to be. The road was gone. But as I drove past, my headlights swept the edge of the embankment, and there, just for a second, I saw a barefoot girl in a pale dress, watching from the darkness. And when I checked my mirror, 2 flickering headlights followed close behind. Some roads never forget. I used to think ghosts haunted houses. Now I know better. They haunt moments. Places where the world split open and something tragic spilled out. Highways are full of those moments. Every mile is lined with stories that never ended, tragedies that never resolved. Sometimes, those stories stay buried beneath the asphalt. And sometimes, they step out onto the shoulder, waiting to be seen. So if you're ever driving I-84 late at night and see a narrow exit marked 119, do yourself a favor, don't take it. Don't slow down. Don't look too long at the girl standing barefoot by the road. Because that exit hasn't existed for over 30 years. And the girl you see there, isn't alive. This is one of those highway horror stories, true, that clings to you long after the road disappears in your rearview mirror. A forgotten ramp. A tragedy frozen in time. And a girl who never made it home, still standing at the edge of the highway, waiting for a ride that will never come. The highway is supposed to be a place of movement, a line that connects us to the world beyond. But as these stories remind us, it's also a place of memory. Every mile is marked by moments of joy and tragedy, beginnings and endings. And sometimes, those endings don't stay buried. Sometimes, they step out of the shadows, waiting just beyond the edge of your headlights. So the next time you're driving alone at night and the road ahead seems a little too empty, glance at the shoulder. Look carefully at the off-ramps you pass. And if you happen to see someone standing barefoot in the dark, watching you go by, just keep driving. Because out here, on the endless asphalt, the past is never as far behind us as we think. Soft pause. Thank you for joining me tonight for these highway horror stories, true. Sleep well, and if you're on the road, keep your eyes on the darkness ahead.